I'm very excited to invite my guest for today into this chat. Nicki Straza is a respected workplace culture strategist, speaker, and certified flourishing facilitator across nonprofit, corporate, manufacturing, and small business sectors. A recognized specialist in generational diversity, Nicki equips leaders to bridge communication gaps, increase engagement, and build collaborative environments that meet the needs of a multi-generational workforce. She helps leaders build trust across generations. Let me welcome into the pod, Nicki. So glad you're here.
Welcome back to The Thermostat with Jason Barger. If you're currently on a commute, a walk, or just a micro break in your day, glad you're making time to step back, to think, and to reflect on the next steps on your journey. I've never been more convinced the best leaders and team cultures in the world are the ones that make time to step back, breathe in good oxygen, and calibrate their thermostat. I hope today's conversation leaves you feeling grounded and inspired. Now let's dive into today's topic to engage our minds and hearts in order to authentically lead and create compelling cultures wherever we are in the world.
Hey everyone, it's Jason and welcome back to the Thermostat Podcast, wherever you are and however you're coming to the podcast today. Just glad you're here. Welcome in. If you are new to the podcast, we're in season 9. We've got, I think, 290 episodes or something like that right now. So if you are new and you are trying to figure out about this podcast, just Google my name, Jason Barger, and any topic that you're looking for as it relates to leadership or culture or mindset, servant leadership, emotional intelligence, trust, whatever it is that you're interested in, and chances are you're going to find something. Also, I've had the great privilege to have many great friends and thought leaders and folks from all over join me over the years on this podcast. And so there's some really great stuff on there that I invite you to go back and check out. And today's guest, who I will introduce in just a second, is another great example of that. If you're one of the folks that have been with us from the very beginning, then so glad this continues to add value to your life and your work. My commitment every time I do one of these recordings is I want this to be a place for you to step back, for you to have some time to think and hopefully have some good oxygen breathed into you so that you can think about that temperature that you're trying to set in your life and in your work, and really appreciate you being here. Before we dive into today, if you'll do me, of course, the quick favor, I keep being told you got to keep telling people this, but if you'll subscribe if you haven't already, if you'll rate the podcast 5 stars, of course, on whatever platform you're using, authentic reviews in your own words, that helps the algorithms work and help it amplify the messages further in the world. So if you take a minute to do that. And then, of course, every time you share the episodes, if something resonates with you, share it. Share it, whether that's on social media, if that's authentic for you, or colleagues, teams. Hey, let's have a listen to this episode, and then let's listen to the questions. Let's talk about it internally. All of those ways help amplify the messages, and that's the point, is to hopefully set a good temperature in people's lives and work. And so thank you to everybody that takes a minute to do that. I'm very excited to invite my guest for today into this chat. Nicki Straza is a respected workplace culture strategist, speaker, and certified flourishing facilitator with more than 25 years of leadership and organizational development experience across nonprofit, corporate, manufacturing, and small business sectors. As the founder of Straza Solutions, Nicki partners with organizations to foster inclusive, trust-based workplaces where people can thrive individually and collectively. A recognized specialist in generational diversity, Nicki equips leaders to bridge communication gaps, increase engagement, and build collaborative environments that meet the needs of a multi-generational workforce. She helps leaders build trust across generations. Nicki and I connected recently and had a great chat, and awesome to see some synergy within the work. And I was excited to share some of that with you all. So let me welcome into the pod, Nicki. So glad you're here.
Thank you for having me, Jason. It's great to be here. It's been great to connect and always find, kin in the mindset around culture. So thank you for that.
Yeah, no, it's great. I really appreciated our first conversation and glad to support folks that are doing great stuff out there and bringing you in to share your ideas and how it connects with this whole idea of thermostat cultures and developing authentic and compelling leaders and people and environments around the world. So glad you're with us. But, for listeners that might not know you, tell us something unique about you that maybe we wouldn't No.
Well, that's always an interesting question. But I love to play, to be honest. And I have a massive Lego collection, and I am old and still thoroughly enjoy building Lego. I have my Lego sunflowers back here. I think we get old when we stop playing.
I love it. I love it. Well, glad you're continuing to find joy in Legos and building those. And that's awesome. So, much of your work with organizations is focused on building trust across generations in the workforce. And I certainly have my observations of working with many different teams and organizations across sectors where we're, when we're coming in to help support them, we're helping to develop people in some sense. We're helping to shape culture proactively. We're trying to find clarity around mission, vision, and values, and certainly have my observations of what I'm seeing from a generational experience in the workforce. But interested in just what trends or challenges or opportunities do you see in the kind of generations in the workforce today?
That's a great question, Jason. And I think one of the challenges is that for the first time in recorded history, we actually have 4, maybe even 5 different generations working in the workplace now. We're living longer, we're working longer, and technology is changing things at rapid paces, which is actually widening the gap and the understanding between generations. I mean, if you consider 200 or 300 years ago, grandparent, parent, child likely had similar roles and similar, jobs and tasks, and those jobs didn't evolve tremendously over the course of a generation or two. But today, not only does grandparent and grandchild have no idea what each other does, but the transferable skills and the interpersonal skills and how those things roll out in the workplace are evolving and changing too. And it's almost like we're speaking different languages from one generation to another. And then we wonder why we are having all this conflict and misunderstanding and bias and stigma and all of the assumptions that come along with thinking my way's the right way.
Yeah, no doubt. That is certainly rings true for what I've experienced in organizations. And I think that analogy around speaking different language is a good one because, you have folks that are more seasoned in their careers and have found their way of doing things and certainly have the experience and a knowledge base and certainly have oftentimes been successful where they are. And yet at the rapid change of technology and growth and changing market conditions and all of the things that we know are happening in the world, also may not speak a language of maybe a younger generation. And you have younger generations coming in, obviously, that see things from a different angle of vision, have a different life experience, see that opportunity, I think, in technology oftentimes quicker than maybe other generations before them did. And so you have this kind of, we're speaking different languages. And the easy thing that often happens is then we stereotype and generalize the way people are. And so we'll label an entire generation as lazy or they, they don't care about anything or they're not reliable. And yet what I've at least found is that different doesn't always mean worse. And in fact, I think part of that building of trust within that relationship that I know you talk about, I'm going to ask you about in a second, is that getting curious about how the other one might see something that I don't necessarily see. And in doing so, with that curiosity towards the other experience, you build a bond and a connection that wouldn't be there if you just jump to the generalization. Does that resonate at all with you?
100%. And I think that's actually really the key, not only in interpersonal skills, but in intergenerational skills. And, we always talk about the different language, but let's think about how the language we use and the meanings change. We talk about respect, for example. We all use the same word respect, but to a silent or a boomer or even a Gen Xer, what constitutes or how respect behaves is very, very different from how respect behaves for a millennial or a Gen Z or a Gen Alpha that's coming up in school now. And so sometimes the confusion and the complication is we're using the same language, but we have a very different meaning. And we aren't going to learn to understand how someone's experiencing and interpreting things. We don't lean in with that curiosity and actually be willing to put our assumptions on trial and say, hey, like, tell me how you're experiencing this. Tell me what this looks like for you. Tell me what this means to you.
Yeah, I love that. My listeners will, or anybody that's read my book, Thermostat Cultures, or been around this kind of this conversation around proactive culture shaping knows that a phrase that I often talk about is that language helps drive behavior. And yet what that means is we have to define what is the language that we're actually using. And so you're right. This happens in organizations all the time, is that we say, even things like our core values, we say the word integrity or we say the word trust, and yet we don't often take the time to define what does that look like to you and I, and how might we interpret it differently, and what is that common language that's going to help drive the behavior that we want. And so when we're speaking different languages, we may be using very similar words, but our understanding of those words is different. And so really, which I know to some people, it feels as if, well, man, we can't possibly take the time to do this. And yet the reality is, if you don't take the time to do it, then you can't be surprised when you don't have alignment with your people.
Yeah. And I would add to that layer of not just defining, but describing the behaviors that actually enact that value. Because it's all fine and well to say, integrity is, being a person of our word. But, what does that mean? It means that if I make a promise, I keep it in the time I said. Or right. Whatever, like we get really, precise and clear. Brene Brown, clear is kind, unclear is unkind. And the more we can really help people see what that behavior, that value looks like in reflected behavior, I think is transformative in a culture. And you hit on something that's so important because, I don't have time for this. Things have changed so much that we can't afford not to have time. There's the cliche, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Well, I would offer it eats your profits for lunch if you're not careful and you don't actually prioritize culture. And it's an intangible. It's hard to put your finger on. It's not that, thing in the production line. It's not that cog in the wheel. And so it becomes a lot more murky and a lot more complex to be able to put your finger on and actually move change.
Yeah. And back to the language thing, to bridge the gap between, and that last statement you made is that if we can't describe the future that we want, then we can't be surprised when it doesn't exist. And so not only being able to describe it, but making that link to action and behavior of this is what it looks like to live this in action and behavior, not just to cognitively know what it is, but to put it into practice. This is what it will look like for me to practice trying to be that leader or trying to be an ambassador for this future culture that we want to create. And I would absolutely agree with you, because I hear this all the time, is that people want to talk about what the quote unquote ROI, what's the return on investment of developing people and culture. And I often say that right now, in the world that we're in right now, that your culture is your greatest competitive advantage. And the reality is, what's the return on investment? Well, in short, it's massive. Because if you can't, think about the cost that it requires to retain your great people, and the cost of turnover to an organization when people are a revolving door and going out the door. And yet, what does it mean if you could retain a greater amount of your people? What does it mean to attract more people in a time when there's been work shortages and a war for talent and all the things that we hear about, where all of a sudden your place of employment is a place that if I'm going to be in this industry, I want to work with you, let alone all of the metrics that we've known for decades now of higher levels of engagement leading to higher levels of performance. So all of those things, when anybody says we can't take the time, or like, how could we possibly, like, what's the return on this culture thing? My response is always massive. And then we go into that conversation. You have a culture cost calculator that you've really used to try to show people that the impact that developing culture has in a positive way on organizations, or if you say, hey, we don't have time for this, of the way it might eat that culture for lunch, or eat your profits for lunch, as you just said. So tell us a little about this culture cost calculator. But before we dive into that topic, let's take a break. Let's pause for a second, and we'll be right back. Many teams and organizations right now are realizing that they need to do both. They need to engage the minds and hearts of their people in person, where everyone in the room can experience the energy of congregating together and find clarity for the road ahead. And they also need to continue to find ways to engage the minds and hearts of their people virtually, with those who are working remotely or at a distance. So, if you are in the process of planning your next team meeting, company all-hands event, conference, or culture summit, and are looking for support with a powerful keynote speech, facilitated team conversations that are the currency for change, or deeper development on leadership mindset and an intentional strategy for the culture you're trying to create, I hope you'll contact us at jasonvbarger.com, jasonvbarger.com. It is my privilege and our honor to partner with great people to provide support in these areas. We want to breathe oxygen into your leaders and throughout your organization so you can set the temperature you want for your culture. We look forward to connecting with you soon. I hope you'll contact us at jasonvbarger.com, jasonvbarger.com. It is my privilege and our honor to partner with great people to provide support in these areas. We want to breathe oxygen into your leaders and throughout your organization so you can set the temperature you want for your culture. We look forward to connecting with you soon. So tell us a little about this culture cost calculator.
Well, it's so interesting because it was actually born out of so many of these conversations that I was having about, we have to focus on production. We have to focus on this. We have to be streamlined. We have to be efficient. And that's what helps us make our money. And there's so much compelling research now that's come out that really puts points the finger at workplace dynamic as a key metric in profitability. And the ROI is coming at, for every dollar we invest in well-being and in culture, there's a $2 to $7 return on investment in savings, in lost, reduced turnover, all the things that you mentioned. And I was having a hard time, making that compelling argument. And I thought, you know what, if I need to talk dollars to dollars, I need a tool to do that. And so I created the culture cost calculator to help my, engineer, my dollar-brained individuals who would believe me when I could show them that this was costing their organization hundreds of thousands of dollars, and actually do the math. And so I actually created the calculator. It goes through, 5 or 6 direct and indirect culture related costs that are sometimes show up on an income statement, sometimes don't. And I asked them to do some math on, what is this actually looking like on your balance sheet and on your P&L? Because if you could actually, explore that, you would all of a sudden see how great a deal my program is, or this work is. Like if spending, $50,000 or $100,000 in a year or 2-year investment could change, that, $1.5 million price tag to $500,000, is that not worth it? Right? And the average organization, if we use statistical data, obviously, 100 employees, average company using statistical averages, $1.8 million lost in culture-related expenses. That's a big number.
Oh, that's what I mean by massive. And that's why, again, when you sort of say, what's the return on this? Well, it's massive. And, when you talk about it in this, that there's direct financial costs, and so those things like turnover, like, okay, well, what is the cost? We know that every time you have to replace a new employee, there's a dollar figure that you can put to what that is. And oftentimes there's then to find the right person at the salary range, it's whatever X the salary of that person to replace them. So we know things like that, direct costs. We know then what is it, the direct thing of, okay, then we have to go recruit. So what are we spending on the outbound to go find people? And that, especially if we have a revolving door, then now we're doubling that by our recruiting and that turnover costs. Then there's things like, okay, well, in the loss of the work that we're doing, we've got to have temporary staffing to try to, fill that gap. There's those kind of direct, and then there's the indirect. Talk a little bit about those indirect things, because I think a lot of people can wrap their heads quickly around, okay, the direct costs. Then there's the indirect costs, which sometimes is kind of the iceberg or like underneath the water, I think.
Oh, I love that description. And that's exactly right. And often it's the indirect things that actually get us and they snag us. And it's stuff like decreased productivity. When our people are dreading coming into work, they might be showing up late. They might be taking longer breaks. They might be asking for more time off. There might be more sick days. They might, have to go home early because they're stressed. They're overwhelmed. They don't have great relationships at work. Their managers are stressing them out, or vice versa. We have the, damaged reputation. When you become known for a place that people don't want to work, that is really hard and expensive to recover from, because, in that conversation of retaining our best talent, well, when we have unhealthy or dysfunctional culture, our best talent always is the first to leave. And, we have healthcare costs, legal costs, inability to attract attention. And let's talk about the loss of innovation. Research has really demonstrated that one of the first, kind of components of engagement to go is that willingness to try something new and bring a new idea to the table. And that also often has to do with lack of, cultural, psychological safety. It's more of a control and command environment. And it's about getting the job done versus exploring the best way to do the job. Yep. And that loss of innovation could be the difference between being on the cutting edge and ahead of my competitors and flagging and heading to stagnation.
Yeah, I love that. The indirect of what are those ideas that aren't being explored because we're spending so much fuel over here again with a revolving door and trying to refill positions. And therefore then there's this lag of time, and like, what are we missing in terms of that innovative idea that might come? I also love that this idea, the indirect, which I think is a huge piece of the puzzle, is when, I've seen this with many of the organizations that I support, is when we've, in some cases, we've dropped the turnover from 20% down to 8%, from 15% down to 7%. You see this change in not only their turnover, which once again, the economics to that, the financial impact is massive to that when you can do that, especially in large organizations. And then you start thinking about all of a sudden when hiring starts picking up, because the brand and the culture, the word about the culture gets out there and it becomes a more attractive place to be. When people win, when organizations win those best places to work awards, they see increases in people wanting to work for them. When they aren't winning those things and word gets out that the culture's toxic, it's harder to recruit people to that. So the quick analogy I always think about is every year in college sports, you watch who are the teams that are the teams that win, and all of a sudden the brands that take this massive jump in student enrollment just because of the jump that the brand gets from this notarization, they get recognized in basketball or football. And all of a sudden there's a correlation with this giant jump in the brand. And part of that is people's association with, what do I think of that brand? And the same thing happens with cultures in a positive way and in a negative way with every organization.
You're absolutely right. And I think, because culture is the water we swim in, Oftentimes companies make the mistake of taking the fish out, going and shining them up and making them all shiny and pretty, and then plunking them right back in the dirty water and then wondering why things don't change. Mm. But here's the thing. When we clean the tank, we clean the water, we filter things through, we make it a healthy place so our fish aren't sick and they're not diseased. They're not, they can see, they have clarity. When we start to clean the tank and we start to clean the water, it changes, and it makes things attractive. And people on the outside can see inside the tank and they begin to see what's going on. They begin to say, hey, that's where a place I want to belong. And the shift is moving from task first to people first. Yep. And depending on what generation you grew up in, that was not a default kind of mechanism, and it's not necessarily older generation's fault. That's what they were handed. And we have an opportunity to continue to evolve and grow our systems and our dynamics. And, I always kind of describe, culture as the byproduct of the dynamics between people and people and systems. And if we can start to pay attention on the dynamics and the nuances of that, we are going to start to see the mechanics that actually make healthy culture thrive and grow. And it turns, Sunday night from, oh dear God, I have to go to work tomorrow and I have to listen to, and I have to tolerate, and I have to, whatever it is, to, oh my gosh, I get to go to work tomorrow because I get to, and I get to, and I get to. And that environmental shift is transformative for people. And when we can lean into creating an environment that empowers and strengthens and believes in people, they bring unbelievable resource, capacity, skill, and ingenuity to the team that would always or often be lost in the drudgery of the task list.
Yeah, it's as if we haven't even talked about this, but it's as if you were listening. I did an episode not too long ago that talked about the cultural ecosystem over our individual ecosystem.
Love it.
And this really what you're describing is when we start to shift the way we think and approach, that our mindset individually and collectively is first and foremost thinking about the cultural ecosystem and our role in it, and how every single thing culture's dynamic. So it's shaped moment by moment by the way we think, act, and interact. And so how we begin to think first about that rather than my own self-interest, my own, what is it that I need? What is it I want? All of a sudden that, to your image, that tank gets cleaner. And all of a sudden we all are ambassadors for the ecosystem, not just what's in it for me.
And I think what you're saying is so important, but it really comes down to this gritty, messy invitation for us as leaders to recognize that the culture that's happening in here, in between my ears, in my heart, becomes the culture out here in my organization. And so as much as we want to be performative, and if I just do this behavior this way and do this, that lack of authenticity, and because it's not actually flowing out of who we are, in our character of our leadership, it's going to break down. And so the real work of culture change is leaders. Can we change? Can we grow? And, that's where our ego gets in the way so often. And I really appreciate that ecosystem versus ecosystem language is brilliant.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah. It's as if, again, we had talked about this ahead of time, which we had not, but, my listeners again will their ears will perk up, but culture shaping is an inside job first.
Yes.
And so that work from the inside and then flowing to the outside, that I have to be an ambassador for the culture that I want to be a part of.
Yeah.
And when we get more clear on that and the inner work to say, all right, how are we going to do that as a leadership team? And how are we imperfectly, none of us are perfect people. No, there's no perfect team. There's no perfect organization yet to find it in the world. But I have found ones that have greater clarity and commitment to, we've got to be able to be those thermostats, which means we're going to have to calibrate them. from time to time, but we're going to have to be the ones to first do that work for ourselves so that we can set the ecosystem for others.
I love that. And really a thriving or a flourishing workplace is less about perfection. It's more about resilience. It's less about executing perfectly. It's more about being able to circle back and maintain and protect connection and dignity amongst our party members and amongst our people. And when we can create a place where mistakes can happen and the circle back is normalized and, forgiveness and grace and all of those really noble things start to actually find, substance within our culture, well, oh my goodness, what does that make possible?
Yeah, I love it. I want to ask two kind of quick hitting questions. I just want to get your off the top of your head. I'm curious about your response to this, especially thinking generationally. What advice would you give to a young person that's entering a new culture and looking to build trust with older generations? What quick advice would you give somebody?
Trust is built with older generations through reliability and being a person of your word. Demonstrate that and earn the right to be heard and earn the right to share your expertise. And ask for what you need. Most young people, I think we all make this assumption. We think other people know what, our needs are common, but they're not. And, how do we lean in and say, oh, I really care about wanting to do this job excellently, but I recognize I'm misunderstanding something here. Can you show me another way?
I love it.
And being able to, lead up and ask for what you need with that kind of humility and that respect. It goes a long way. And most leaders lean into that. They want to see and want to support someone who demonstrates that, engagement and reliability.
Yep. Love it. I'd say to people all the time is engage. The younger folks engage. And part of that is show up, show a track record that you're reliable in your word and your action. Show up, listen, be willing to take a posture of listening and curiosity and show people that you're willing to learn and work well with other people. Like if literally you can do those three things, it's amazing how the doors open. And I think older generations begin to spot that and then begin to really, my words, but breathe oxygen into it and really bring that to life. The other question I'd ask you is, so what advice would you then give to leaders looking to create a more compelling culture? What?
Don't believe that your interpretation of what culture looks like is right. Question your need to be right and get curious. Create an opportunity for yourselves and your team members to learn from all of your generations in your workplace and create collaboration versus dictation. And, I think when older generations can lean into a coaching model and a collaborative invitation to contribute and co-develop things, it's a hard mindset set shift for older generations to make because it's countercultural to what they thought were taught worked. But in the new generation, it's how you build succession. It's how you see your legacy amplified and living on. And it's also how you create cohesion within teams across generations.
Love it. We're in a participatory world and we're co-creating cultures together. So that idea of, cultures don't just magically happen. They're intentionally led and co-created together. So that two-way street of what is it we're trying to do together? How do we bring our thinking, acting, and interacting into alignment? And also recognizing that it takes time. And so oftentimes we get distracted by the next shiny object and we want to jump from one thing to the next. And so I talk a lot about where you look is where you go. Where you look, your body will follow. And so that commitment to the long haul and being able to say, I think that's part of that mindset shift that you were just talking about, Nicki, is that kind of shifting from that I'm not about just telling you what to do, but I'm a participant and a listener and a co-creator and I'm curious about what you see and what you think, and how do we shape the future. So that's all really, really good stuff.
I think that coaching skill set is so valuable, and younger people really respond to that investing in their critical thinking skills and their autonomy. When we come across more as a teacher, and I'm going to tell you how it is, most of us don't hear that well. Right. But if that, invitation of, well, what do you think we should do? What problems or challenges do you see? What, and kind of invite them into this conversation of developing their thinking and then sharing what you know. It changes the conversation. And I've watched cultures be transformed simply because technicians and tradesmen and leaders have, instead of, I'm going to tell you and you're going to follow, it becomes this kind of come from underneath coach and question and be curious. And it changes the relationships entirely. And it's truly magical.
I love it. My listeners will be familiar with the phrase, conversations are the currency for change. And so us being able to say, all right, well, let's have that conversation together. What are you experiencing? That posture of listening, that, let's get clear again on those behaviors and what is it that we're trying to create together? And then what do you think? How might we move forward together? And that conversation becomes the currency for change. So, Nicki, I could do this all day, but I'm trying to be respectful of our listeners and wanting to make sure that we stay at the time that we've kind of committed to. So, I just want to say thank you for joining and appreciate everything that you're doing. We're going to put stuff in the show notes, and if you want to connect with Nicki or learn more about what she's doing, you can certainly find her on social media, Nicki Straza, at Nicki Straza, and then also we'll put other stuff in the info in the show notes and all that kind of stuff. But thank you for joining, Nicki. Appreciate you being here, and always fun to chat for a few minutes about these topics.
Thank you, Jason. I appreciate you having me, and I honor you for the hard work and the consistency that you keep bringing around language and around culture. I was immediately drawn to your language around thermostat, and I think it's such a great metaphor for how we function as leaders. So thank you for leading the charge on that.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Nicki. Well, everybody, I hope today's episode got you thinking in some ways. I hope it breathed a little good oxygen into you, got you thinking about that temperature that you hope to set in your life and your work. And I hope it also got you thinking about that we are all ambassadors for that future that we want to create. We all play a role in that ecosystem. And across generations, we are co-creators, we are participants, and we have an opportunity together to have those kind of conversations that are the currency for change, to realize that culture shaping isn't an add-on, but there's a cost to it. And in fact, the best places understand that it's an investment, because the best places know that this becomes the air that we breathe. This becomes just who we are. And so it's awesome to get a few minutes to reflect on that, to step back and to think. So again, thanks to everybody out there for listening. I hope this has been a good episode for you. I'll lastly remind you, of course, to subscribe, to rate, to review in your own authentic words. And hopefully, if something resonates with you, share it with other people. That's the way good things in the world spread. And so appreciate everybody that takes the time to do that. And lastly, I'll just remind you to step back, remember, be a thermostat, and breathe good oxygen.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast, and I hope the messages and questions stimulate positive change along your path. As always, if these messages resonate with you and add value to your life, I hope you'll help amplify them throughout the world. Please rate, comment, and share on whatever podcast or social media platform you're using, and share this podcast with the people in your life or work who should be part of these conversations. That way, this spirit does, in fact, spread. If these messages or developing leaders and culture would be helpful to you and your organization, please contact us at jasonvbarger.com, jasonvbarger.com. And remember, we are all ambassadors for the culture we want to create in our life and work. We have to own the vision we want to be a part of. The future of leadership is you, is me, is us. Be a thermostat.